Good morning, everyone. We got as many up here as we do out there, right? That's how many people it takes, I guess, to do something as complicated as we've been involved in for months. Well, today marks the beginning. I hope this is no overstatement, but I think it begins or marks the beginning of a revolution in infrastructure planning, financing, and reliability for the District of Columbia electric power grid. The innovative public-private partnership, I know that term resonates with you, Jim. We're glad you're here, too. Thank you for coming this morning. That we developed is historic in its scope and planned implementation. Last August, I called for a game changer after repeated power outages caused by a series of severe storms and delays in restoring power to many district residents and businesses. I announced the creation of the Mayor's Power Line Undergrounding Task Force, but I made clear that this would not be another think tank that met just to meet or to produce a report that would collect dust, as unfortunately many other reports have done in the past. I demanded action, and today I'm proud to announce the task force recommendations that indeed place the District of Columbia in the vanguard of states working to strengthen their electric utility infrastructure. Given what appears to be a new climate pattern that is making severe storms more and more common, the time is now for action. However, before I detail the recommendations, I want to introduce the task force members. I want to make particular note of the work of the co-chairs. First of all, City Administrator Alan Lew. Where are you, Alan? There you are. Thank you for your work, Alan. I appreciate it. Alan, you know, is our go-to guy, and that is when you got a really difficult thing, you say, okay, Alan, time to get in the game. And, of course, the other one is somebody who really has been an excellent partner, and that is the CEO of Pepco Holdings. He's the president and CEO, and that, of course, is Joe Rigby. Joe, thank you very much for your work. You know, I think it's historic that we got together in this way. Not just Alan and Joe, but also some of the other members of the task force as well. Again, both of the co-chairs played immensely important roles in building the special public-private partnership that emanated from this. And they did not leave, the heavy lifting to their staff. Joe and Alan actually rolled up their sleeves and worked with the task force members. Their staffs and consultants have hammered out what I think is an extraordinary plan of action that will strengthen the system and markedly improve reliability. Other task force members included our public members, Herb Harris, a resident of Ward 7 and someone I worked with for a very long time, Matt Fruman, who lives in Ward 3 and devoted an enormous amount of time, energy, and brain power as well to this effort. They both brought a lot of experience to this, and like so many other people have had enough experience with power outages. We also had Ward 7 Councilmember Yvette Alexander, who at the time of her appointment to this task force was chair of the Council's Committee on Public Services and Consumer Affairs. She has now moved on to be the chair of the Committee on Health in the Council. We also had Deputy Mayor for Public Safety and Justice, Paul Quander, our Chief Financial Officer, Nat Gandhi, the District of Columbia Department of Transportation Director Terry Bellamy, the Department of the Environment Director Keith Anderson, Department of Public Works Director Bill Howland, the Mayor's Office of Budget and Finance Director Eric Goulet, the D.C. Public Service Commission Chair Betty Ann Kane. And Betty Ann, I want to thank you for your outstanding work. Where are you? You know what, I got a 50-50 chance of getting this right, and I've gotten it wrong every time, right? Wait a minute. And thank you, Betty Ann, because I know you have enormous responsibilities, and to be able to take out the time that you've taken over these months to do this is most appreciated. And, of course, the People's Council, without whom we could certainly would not do any of this, Sandra Matavu-Fry. Sandra, thank you very much for your work. Got it right that time, good. We also had the utilities working with us, although we wanted them to be involved, the other utilities, the communications utilities. Verizon Vice President for Government Affairs, Karen Campbell, and Comcast Vice President for Government and Regulatory Affairs, Donna Ratley Washington, both worked with us as well. We announced a completion date of January 31st, and there are those who asked me where we got that date from. It was right out of the air. There was no history to this. There was no rationale for this other than wanting to put a target in place so we could get finished. And it didn't take long for us to get into this, and Alan and I talked about it, to recognize that these issues were so hugely complex, and of course continue to be, that it simply wasn't going to be possible to have a responsible plan that would be completed by January 31st. Some asked me if I was concerned that the task force report was not completed by January 31st, and of course I was. But I would have been more concerned if we had produced a product that we couldn't stand behind. What good does it stand up and say, we have a report by January 31st, it's terrible, but we finished the assignment, guys. We got our homework in on time, but we got a D- on the homework, so I think everybody can understand that. I'm going to provide a brief summary of the recommendations, and then I'm going to have Joe and Alan to come up to talk about the technical details. And then after them, I want to hear from Commission Chair Kane and also the People's Council Chair, Head, Sandra Matabu-Fry. Now, the recommendations. 1, the task force proposes to underground select mainline feeders and laterals, but to leave secondary lines overhead. And I mean, what I think is that this will mean in the first wave of this effort, there will be 60 of the principal feeders that will be addressed that frankly contribute mightily to the power outages that we experience here in the city. This is the preferred scenario of several opportunities that were studied because it has the best balance between cost and improvement and reliability. The effort is estimated to cost approximately $1 billion and will last 7 years. The task force proposes a public-private partnership. Pepco would fund up to $500 million of projects with cost recovery achieved through an electric utility improvement charge, which has been talked about fairly extensively. This is historic, I think. It's the first time that I'm aware of that a local municipality, that would be us, and a utility provider, that would be Pepco, are jointly petitioning the Public Service Commission to make this level of improvement to a system. The Public Service Commission would implement an electric utility improvement charge to facilitate timely recovery of the investment needed for the upgrades concurrent with the upgrades being made. And design and customer education would begin within 90 days of the approval by the Public Service Commission. Now, just in terms of some of the technical details, undergrounding will involve only select mainline feeders and laterals. I alluded to that earlier, leaving secondary lines overhead, and will achieve nearly all of the reliability benefits at 60% of the cost to underground all overhead lines, including secondary lines along each one of the feeders that I mentioned before. This scenario would eliminate overhead causes of outages on the main line and lateral primary feeders. Everybody got that? The customers on the improved feeders in total would see, and this is phenomenal, a 97% decrease in the frequency of power outages and a 92% decrease in the duration of those outages that did occur. DDOT and Pepco will coordinate their work where possible with other construction projects. In essence, DDOT is always working on the streets, so we'll try to coordinate with them so that the undergrounding with Pepco takes place when those streets are going to be worked on in the first place. As far as next steps are concerned, To execute the recommendations of the task force, enabling legislation will be necessary to, one, authorize securitization financing mechanisms to facilitate the approved work, and two, to establish an undergrounding infrastructure charge to allow Pepco to adjust its rates to provide for the timely recovery of the costs associated with the undergrounding work as recommended by the task force. And I suspect that is the area that many, if not everybody, will be concerned about, and that is, what is this going to cost us? And you know, I would ask people, as we look at what I think is a very reasonable cost that's been developed by the task force, to think about what is it costing us now to have these outages. There are thousands and tens of thousands of people who experience this, and what occurs, you know, with them, with us, when these things happen. Legislation also will set forth the continued role of the Public Service Commission relative to ongoing work related to the task force report. This includes evaluating the prudence of expenditures made when the company requests that the related assets be added to the rate base. That legislation is being prepared and will be sent to the council sometime over the next several weeks. As we know, the council right now is deeply involved with the budget. That will go on now for another several weeks, and this is unlikely to get the focus until the council gets past the budget, which is understandable. The task force executive summary report will be posted on the Office of the City Administrator website today, and the full report will be posted within the next 30 days. Finally, let me make note of the economic benefits that the task force report highlights. Again, the priority for the task force was to examine how to improve electric reliability, but there are certain economic benefits that will accrue to all of us as well. To that end, the power line undergrounding program is anticipated to produce, get this, approximately 4,000 direct jobs and 150 indirect jobs based on the level of economic activity related to this program. As Pepco and DDOT invest in construction and distribution related activities, employment for DC residents will be seen in a variety of ways, including, one, direct Pepco employment in both the field and professional levels across a variety of functions, from installing cable to designing projects and maintaining equipment. Two, direct contractor employment, mostly in construction and engineering roles. And three, direct employment along the regional supply chain that provides materials and services to Pepco, DDOT, and their respective contractors. I'm glad that our DOES director is here today, Lisa. I think you can see that there's a very important role in this for DOES to make sure. I would love to have us in a position to say that 100% of the people who will be hired for this project, in fact, are DC residents, which means, indeed, we are recycling those dollars through the tax dollars that will be paid by those folks that are hired. Again, I want to thank all the members of the task force who worked very hard. I don't know how many meetings they had. I don't know how many hours they had, but it is dozens of meetings and hundreds of hours devoted to this effort. President Obama just conducted a meeting last week, right, Joe?
That's correct.
With senior utility company executives to discuss the emergency response to Hurricane Sandy and other major storms that impact power and ways to improve restoration. Joe Rigby attended that meeting, and as I understand it, while he wasn't sitting right next to the president, he was just 2 seats away. And I'm sure that the president turned to you and said, "Tell us what's going on with the..." Yeah, okay. I'll let Joe speak for himself on that, but I can't stress enough the uniqueness of what the district and Pepco are doing. I don't know of any other utilities and municipalities or governments that are actually working to this extent and to this level. Again, I'm sure that he let Mr. Obama know what we're trying to do here in the nation's capital, since he obviously is one of our residents. Again, I regard this as the game changer that we were looking for, the thing that I called for, and we have strong public and private partners that have come together to solve another long-standing infrastructure challenge in the city. every district resident in one way or the other will benefit from these investments, not just the ones in affected areas, because the city's entire infrastructure, including police stations, firehouses, libraries, senior residences, and of course schools. Just think about the fact that when schools have to be closed because of power outages, and how many parents are affected by that because their children can't go to school. Now, I want to call upon our city administrator, who really has done an extraordinary job in leading this effort. Alan is somebody I've worked with for a long time, and if you give him a task to get done, you can absolutely count on it getting done. He worked on the Bloomingdale flooding problem, a 100-year-old problem in the city, and we now are well on our way to solving that problem so that people won't have to experience flooding, have flooding experiences in Bloomingdale. And we hope now we are well on our way to being able to solve the problem substantially of power outages in the District of Columbia. So please join me in welcoming first the co-chair, the first co-chair of the task force, our city administrator, Alan Lew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to just give you a little recap of some of the history, the short history. I guess not quite 2 years ago when we started experiencing some severe weather conditions. We talked about how do we address this, and clearly I think we need to applaud the mayor for his political courage. Because there was a question as to what the risk was, and clearly this was a choice of doing the right thing as opposed to the wrong thing, and not necessarily the most political risk adversive type approach. But we ended up with a great partner. We ended up with Pepco and Joe Rigby and his team, and this was probably as the PSC chair Betty Ann Kane has said, it's an innovative approach. It is a public-private partnership, and it's taken all of our resources. And I think the mayor early on realized that we couldn't do this by ourselves, nor is Pepco going to solve this by themselves, but maybe together we can come up with a solution that's not only long-lasting, but that would actually bear fruit for the city and its residents. So this partnership has actually grown over the last 10 months, and we've, we have both the district as well as Pepco has committed all of its resources to enable us to be in this position today. So I'd like to commend the mayor and for his courage and to take this on. And I think that's kind of really special. We are today because he thought we should do it. And of course, he might have thought that once he turned it over to me, it's going to be a slam dunk. Did you? But it's been a great experience for all of us. The mayor mentioned how we met. We probably have met hundreds of times, and probably thousands of hours have been put into this. So even more hours by our staffs. I like to thank a couple of members of my staff who have been working hard and have taken a lot of pressure from me. Phyllis Love, who's in the back there, she's been the staff director. And Tony Robinson, our public affairs director, as well as Barry Kreisworth, who's our senior legal advisor. This couldn't have been possible without all of we have ex-official members that the mayor named to this task force, including probably the one I can sing a lot more is Terry Bellamy, because he spent endless hours working with us, and Eric Goulet, who I have to applaud for his zeal and his long-range thinking, because of Eric, I think he's certainly convinced me that we have to come up with a long-range plan to address all of the feeders out there, not just the so-called priority feeders. And that's something that's well underway, and I think we're going to work together to ensure that's going to happen. And then I must say that People's Council, Sandra Madavu Fry and Betty Ann Kane, their staffs have been very much involved. They have been very much involved, and I have asked them to meet with me sometimes at odd hours and late hours, and they have been really good about it. And And I think it's at the task force meeting that just occurred a few minutes ago before the press conference started. Some of us kind of reminisced about how it was 10 months ago, and it, you know, wasn't quite. 10 months ago, there were probably more doubters and, you know, those who weren't convinced that we could ever come to a point where we can come up with a solution that would work for all of us, not just for the district government and Pepco, but more importantly, the consumers, you know, the homeowners and the property owners. So this has been a wonderful experience from my standpoint, and I like to just thank everyone on the task force for tolerating this co-chair, and I'm not going to speak for the other co-chair. Okay.
I hope, by the way, that the slides that are behind us are not lost on you all. These are fairly recent slides, and they capture some of the experiences that we've had as a result of the derecho, as a result of Sandy, and then in the aftermath, the power outages that emanated from those experiences. I want to call upon now our other co-chair, someone who I've really gotten to know during this process better than I knew before. Someone who I really enjoy working with. I don't know how many times he and I have met about this issue, and most recently just this past Friday. He's someone who I know deeply cares about this issue, but he also deeply cares about the District of Columbia. Please join me in welcoming the President and CEO of Pepco, Joe Rigby.
Thanks. I actually have to start off by saying that I hope my wife was watching this, because it'll answer the question, who the hell is Alan Lew? Yeah, he's going to explain a lot. Well, in all seriousness, I want to make just a couple quick observations. The mayor called me up, I think it was the week in which post the derecho, and no one had ever heard of that storm name. It took out probably 60% of the residents here in the District of Columbia, and took out 4.5 million customers across from Ohio to New Jersey. So when the mayor called me up and said, Joe, we have to do something about this, it dawned on me that this was a very unique opportunity to get into a discussion that we had never had before. And I'm also reflecting on when we had the first task force meeting. Mayor, the thing that I really took away from this is he admonished us to put aside all the difficulties and to have an adult conversation and to not come at this from an adversarial way. And I can't tell you how important that was, because it set a tone where we were going to talk about managing through the facts. And as I think about missing the January 1st, the 31st deadline, my view of that is we hadn't had enough conversation. We hadn't reached the common ground that was necessary to be here today. So this additional time has actually been very much well worth it. And so I want to thank you, because that's what a leader does. And I want to thank you for doing that. Alan and the mayor mentioned how much our folks participated in this, and that's great, but that's what we do. That's what we should be doing. And we've put our best resources on this. Not me, it's the brains behind the operation that we were able to bring to bear, and we're only at the end of a phase, and those resources are going to be continued to be applied, and we're going to see this thing through. In other settings, I've talked about, you know, if you look at this from, I'll say, a regulatory point of view, Pepco's meeting, and in some cases, we're exceeding the reliability standards in the District of Columbia. That's good. But if you think about these pictures, and you think about what is inevitably going to happen again, is that we're going to have more severe weather. And we would be back at this conversation over and over and over again if we didn't collectively step up and try to resolve this issue. And from a technical point of view, it's a very solvable problem. But the muscle and the fortitude to see things through only could come through this discussion. And I want to thank the mayor for that. It's also interesting when we think about it through the eyes of our customers that we have to balance a lot of things. Certainly cost. Certainly also their expectations. I look at standards as here, but expectations are rightly much higher. And this is not unique to Pepco. It's elsewhere, particularly here in the Northeast. Interestingly enough, Mayor, I got an email from one of my colleagues somewhere else in the country when the article came out this morning, and he wanted to know, how did you do this? And it's not, it's not building something. It's from a physical point of view. It's building a relationship to have this kind of dialogue. So, what the mayor said is very true. This is a game changer. This is the first time you're ever going to see all of us up here together. Not the last time, but it takes this kind of a partnership, and the mayor, I think, correctly framed this as a public-private partnership to balance all of the issues of the constituents. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. Mayor also framed this as a win. It's certainly a win for our customers. That's who this is all about. We have a very unique opportunity. It's never lost on me that we get to serve the capital of the free world, and our customers deserve this kind of an effort, and what I think is going to be a really fundamental shift in what they're going to experience. So I want to thank you, Mayor Gray. I want to thank everybody behind me. I want to particularly thank Chairman Kane and People's Counsel, Sandra Matavus-Fry. And Mayor, again, thanks for the opportunity to work with Al and Lew.
Make sure we know how many meetings you told her you were at when you were. The next two people have been mentioned several times. I want to call upon the person who is the Public Service Chair, who some will remember she was also an at-large member of the Council of the District of Columbia at one point, somebody who is absolutely delightful to work with, and without whom we would not have been able to make the progress that we've made. Please welcome Chairman Betty Ann Kane.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for establishing this task force. The Public Service Commission, which is the independent agency, city government that regulates our gas, electric, and telephone utilities, has obviously been concerned about reliability, about outages, about construction for many years, and has taken many steps but to improve that. But it was very clear to me, not only from the derecho storm, but storms that we've had over the hurricanes and the other storms, that to tackle this problem of outages, particularly during storms, that it was going to be more than a single issue for the Public Service Commission to handle, and that we really needed this collaborative effort and this game-changing, not only game-changing result in terms of the plan, but it's a game-changing process. The Public Service Commission is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. We were established in 1913 by Act of Congress, but 25 years before we were established, in 1889, Congress, which was in charge of everything in the district then, passed a law requiring all of the utilities that were in what was then called the city, that's everything south of Florida Avenue down to the rivers, to be put underground. And Congress passed the law, and it happened. We had a study done in 2008 at the commission, which concluded that putting the primary lines and other important key places in the 40% of the city that's not underground would make a great difference. But this is our chance now, since we're in charge with home rule, with the mayor, with the city government, with the Public Service Commission, with the utility, and with People's Counsel, to do the rest of the job. And so I look forward very much to getting the legislation passed, for the Public Service Commission to have a key role in implementing it. I think the key things are that it's going to provide not only reliability, but accountability and a very public process as we go forward to make this really happen, so that all parts of the city, not just those parts that since 1889 have been underground, the downtown and the close-in areas, but all parts of the city can equally experience comfort and expectation and reality that storms are not going to cause this, that are not going to have outages lasting days and weeks, that are not going to have food spoiling in the refrigerator, and even for important public services to be out because the electricity takes a while to come back. So we look forward to working with everyone and to really making this happen. Thank you.
The People's Council plays an incredibly important role in the city. They represent, as they say, they are the council to the people. And Sandra has done a terrific job, an extraordinary job, in my opinion, in being the leader of that effort. And boy, walking a delicate, balance, a tightrope, being the representative of the people, but also being courageous enough to be in a room with those who you oftentimes are in an adversarial, a constructively adversarial role with. I just want to express my appreciation to you, Sandra. And I think you have served the people extraordinarily well in helping us to reach the solution that we are going to pursue in the aftermath. So please welcome our People's Council, Sandra Medavu-Fry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those kind words. Good morning. As I entered this process, I had a healthy skepticism, but an open mind. This was a problem that had been unsolvable for more than a decade. But as I approached it, I had a single focus. That is to ensure that the service provided by our utility was reliable and consistent with being the nation's capital, but at the same time, making certain that the financial burden or the bill impact would not be an undue burden on consumers who have historically paid these costs, not only for good service, but for service that was not what we wanted. As we went on, it occurred to me that the usual business as usual practice simply wasn't going to work. My office had been engaged in regulatory processes and procedures for over a decade, starting with the 1999 ice storm and continuing through the 2007 Shore Report. And in each instance, the Commission attempted to resolve the problem. OPC presented its positions and Pepco presented its. But we were never able to reach an accord simply because of the regulatory parameters that essentially defined how far we could go, what we could do, and what we couldn't do. So it was clear that there needed to be a paradigm shift, and as Mayor Gray says, a new way of looking at business, a changer. And that was the impetus that pushed us forward. And I'm glad to say that as we went on, the parties were able to really put aside this sort of adversarial posture and to come together with a common theme or a common objective to solve the problem and to make the city what it should be in terms of increased reliability. And we accomplished that, but we could not have accomplished it without the leadership and the vision of the mayor. I do believe that this is a victory for consumers. I know that the plan does what I thought it needed to do. That is, it increases reliability. Overall, the 62% increase in reliability over the city is phenomenal. And the 82 to 97% increase on those areas affected by or served by overhead wires is also phenomenal. This is, in fact, unprecedented. No state in the U.S. has embarked upon a plan of this nature. It is single-focused and delivers results. In addition, the rates that will be applied, the impact, what consumers will actually see on their bills is very, very low. And that was one of the historic problems. Everyone essentially agreed that undergrounding was a viable option. That was a good thing, that it would result in reduced outages. However, where we disagreed was in how much that would cost and whether or not the financial burden was worth the benefit. In the early days, we heard figures that ranged from $10 to $20 to $30 per month, and that was simply untenable to the Office of People's Counsel. The fact that we were able to come up with a bill impact that is between $150 and $325 is unheard of, and that was my operating agenda. Again, I am confident that this plan goes far in terms of increasing the quality of service that consumers will benefit from. It protects low-income consumers. They will not see any increase on their bills. It is a fair and equitable plan that is the result of hard work by all of the participants. Again, I am appreciative of the ability to work with the various people. I'm surprised that I was able to do so, but we did it. And I think that the result is a good one. I'm excited about the process. There is still a lot of work to be done, and not all the T's and I's are dotted across, but we have come a long way. And as a person who has been involved in this process for the decade, and my predecessor who brought this issue to the forefront, I think I am happy that we have made significant headway in achieving the desired result. Thank you.
You know, again, this will have wide-ranging implications well beyond what is apparent today, and frankly, well beyond some of the things we've even discussed. I was looking at Keith Anderson behind me, who is now has the stewardship role with our Sustainable DC plan. I'm absolutely convinced that this is going to have an impact on sustainability, energy conservation, energy use in the District of Columbia, and so I'm sure you're factoring that into our Sustainable DC plan, right, Keith? So, again, and that's just one, the employment issues that will emanate from this as well. And I want to thank Sandra for the mention of the cost. I remember when I first got into a discussion about this, and somebody said, well, it probably costs about $6 billion overall. I said, okay, next subject. But, you know, when you start to do the analysis and you get enough people involved in it, you begin to realize, obviously, that there are some ways to do this at an affordable level. And I appreciate Sandra also mentioning that under the Resident Aid Discount Program, which is a program for people who are modest means, they won't be impacted at all. There will be no additions to their bills. The other thing that I hope, is paid attention to out of this, and Jim, I want to thank you again. Jim Denninger, of course, is the CEO of our Board of Trade here in the area. I know you've been a huge proponent of public-private partnerships. You know, there's almost a case study in this of getting people in the same room who, you know, could be defined as natural enemies, who could be defined euphemistically as strange bedfellows. But it also shows that, one, a problem can be solved when you get the right people in the room. And in this particular instance, you had people who were willing to hang up their egos and their titles at the door to say that there's something far more important than this. So I hope you will work with us to be able to illuminate the process that took place here. You know, none of us wants to genuflect at the altar of process, but this was a case where process, the absence of process, would have led us to the absence of a solution. So again, thank you for coming today, Jim, and I hope you'll work with us to be able to proliferate that information more widely. Tom, your hand was up first.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd ask the Public Service Commission Chairman and the People's Council, who will monitor this to see that it's done and that people will be protected? If you're on board at the start, or if you're part of the process, how will you be an independent watchdog of all this as it goes forward?
Well, I'll start, but I can tell you, knowing these people, they're not going to be co-opted by this. You should have watched them involved in this process. They were the watchdogs of that process, and I think they will have little reservation in, I won't say derailing, that they will have little reservation in terms of the legislation has to go forward. They will be assiduously involved in that, and I think every step of the way in terms of implementation, whatever it is that's agreed upon, if it deviates from that, again, you can speak for yourselves, but I have, well, I would be happy to do that, Mr. Sherwood, but you don't mind if I had a word about that, did you?
Consumers, I presume.
Absolutely. So, Sandra, Diane, and whichever wants to go first, together? How about do it together?
Okay, yeah, let me say, Tom, first of all, yes, our role at the Public Service Commission is to see that we have reliable, adequate and reasonably affordable utilities, and that we also have a financially healthy company in the case of each of the industries that we regulate. But as I said at the beginning, my goals going into this was to have not only a plan that would produce reliability, but that also would be accountability in it and transparency. So the outlines and the recommendations from the task force for what would be included in the legislation and what would be included in the process would be a very public process with an annual submission to the commission from the company and in coordination with DDOT and the other city agencies about what the plan would be, an annual review of that, anytime interim plans and updates that the commission would need. All of our processes are public. Everything is on the public record. An annual true-up. Did what was planned to be done actually happen? What did it cost? What that said it would cost? An adjustment in the surcharge is necessary. And so it will be a very, very public process.
Madam People's Council, do you still have the whistle to blow if utilities keep blowing?
I absolutely have the whistle to blow. As we are, as you know, the statutory party in all proceedings before the Public Service Commission. And my single role is to represent consumers. And I never lose sight of that role. It was my role in the task force, and it will be my role in any process that's developed for review of the construction plans or the plans as they go forward. I will only support legislation that explicitly defines OPC's role and continued role consistent with our statutory mandate. To be sure, I will be there.
Mr. Mayor, can I follow up on that? Yeah, go ahead, Bruce. We consistently see with these big projects that you go in with one price, one cost. You've got numbers here for consumers. Most people will probably accept these. But what do you do should Pepco get in there, find out it's going to cost a lot more to put these wires underground? Are you steadfast in these figures, or do you expect some increase at some point in time?
The figures are reasonable projections of what the cost will be. I don't anticipate any wide divergence of those figures. However, the process that is going to be involved will allow us to do a stop and check of those costs on a going forward basis. So I don't expect any rate shock. There will be some deviation between the costs, but generally speaking, I expect them to come within the parameters that are defined.
Well, what are the parameters? I mean, we've got numbers here, but how high might these numbers be?
Well, let me add that the legislation that the task force is recommending will set caps. There will be a cap of 500 million, the numbers you have in there, 500 million on the debt and equity for the company, 375 million on the securitization, and then at least the contributions from DDOT and from other sources can be as large as is possible. They will be caps, so there will not be an exceeding of the authorized.
No, hold on. I just want to be clear. Talk directly to the customers here,
Yes.
the residential business customers. These rate increases that you're projecting here, you know, what is the variation here? How high might they be, and could they possibly be lower? Is that out of the
They
question?
could be lower. Those rate increases, the rate impact, shall we say, that started at $1.50 and would go up to $3.25. First of all, are estimates based on what the cost of and the interest rates for the bonds at 500 million, for the debt and equity at 500 million, the securitized bonds at 375. And so those rates, I might point out, they go up to 325 in the scenarios that were run. And then as those bonds are paid off, the securitized bonds, the rate goes back down. So it doesn't stay there after you use 7 or 8. But those are, that is the ballpark that I think we all felt was acceptable. And those are the rates that we will be looking at each year to see how much money was actually borrowed, how much money was actually spent, and adjusting it.
Mayor, particularly on WTOP, is it conceivable some of these main transmission lines out of the city feed residential and commercial customers in Prince George's and Montgomery counties? And would they
Yes,
benefit
yes, they
from-
do. We will not be, not commercial. Anyway, we, obviously, this is something that we look at now because at the commission and certainly People's Council, and we make very sure that what is allocated to district residents and district businesses is only for costs that are incurred within the district.
I'm not sure I understood that. I thought you said, yes, these lines do serve some residential customers. Did you
But I
say
guess
that?
the point is that the allocation, the cost for those are disaggregated and only DC customers
Separated out.
pay
Separated out.
their portion of the cost.
Yeah.
As close a relationship as we have with our neighbors in other jurisdictions, it doesn't extend to us funding them. Let's get somebody who hasn't, are you media, sir? Okay. Okay, sorry, Gary. Well, are you all going to ask this together? Okay. Go ahead, Dorothy.
The press conference today has already focused on how good it was that everybody worked together. Can Mr. Lew and Mr. Rigby walk us through the details of the plan? We're talking about feeder lines. For the person who's listening to this, what is a feeder line? What wards are you focusing on? And what is your timetable? And tangential with that, can you walk us through the details of how this is going to be paid for? We understand that there's a 50-50 split, but how is the district going to pay its portion of the plan? And especially if you're taking funds from DDOT capital improvement funding, will that adversely impact on streetscaping and other DDOT plans in the years to come?
Well, let me start, and then I'll ask Alan, and I'll ask Terry to come up. But you asked about the wards. It's wards 3, 4, 5, 7. I got it, guys. I got it, okay? I've been involved in the process, too, okay? 3, 5, 7, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Because that's where we've had the most pronounced experience with power outages in the city. Now, with respect to the cost participation of the district, remember that DDOT's participation also is being coordinated with work that we will be doing on streets in the first place. That's one of the wonderful things about this, and that is if DDOT is going to be working on 16th Street, that presents the opportunity then to do any undergrounding that would be done on 16th Street. So it isn't as if DDOT is putting tens of millions of additional dollars on the table that it otherwise wouldn't spend. So, Alan, you want to walk through more of the details of the Joe?
Sure.
Together?
Hey, can you explain to the average person what a feeder line
Right.
is, what you're targeting,
Mhm.
and what your timetable is going to be?
Sure. That's a good question. A little bit of try to put this in layman's terms. What the mayor and what the report's indicating is that we're going to be looking at 60 feeders. Feeders is, if you think about the top lines on a pole, that's what we also call the primaries. So what the mayor said, we're going to be undergrounding selectively some of these primaries. These primaries can range in terms of their voltage from 4,000 to 13,000 volts. So you can think of that as that's the basis coming from a substation that can power an entire neighborhood. So there'd be thousands of people that would be impacted as a result of power coming through a primary line. If we have a storm and a tree takes down the primary, everybody's out. Everybody that's in that area served by that primary is out of power. So as we looked at the alternatives, candidly, kind of the biggest bang for the buck was to be able to take that part of the system that would have the most impact to our customers, that would be vulnerable, and to put it in a more protected state underground. So it's really that simple. So if a tree comes down and it takes out what we call the secondaries, which is just serving the smaller, much smaller part of it, you're going to have many fewer customers negatively impacted. And we're also going to be able to obviously get the power back on a lot faster. This is an analysis that is kind of not static. We look at the performance of all the feeders across the system. So these are the 60 that have been historically have had the most problems in severe storms. So it's pretty straightforward analysis that gets us there. In terms of your question on the timeline, I would look at, best estimate is that probably over the next, let's say, 9 to 12 months, we've got to go through a legislative hearing process. We need to have a law passed that enables the PSC to provide the capability of Pepco to even recover these costs, but also to provide the basis of the city to do its financing. In the background, we're going to be learning. We're going to be actually doing some of this coincidental work with DDOT to understand how all this is going to work. We've got a tremendous amount of engineering work that we have to do, a lot of planning, a lot of coordinating. So our expectation is that in the early part of 2014, as long as the legislative process works according to the timeline we think it will, we're going to have work underway.
But in terms of the timeline, for example, in the technical committee's report, did you identify particular feeder lines that, in terms of the customers most impacted?
Oh, yeah.
Should work on first, and does that translate into particular boards
Yes.
having undergrounding done first as opposed to
Ac-
underground last?
No, our basic view at this point is that we want to avoid any kind of I'll say, favored nations kind of view. So as the mayor articulated, each of the wards impacted, it would be our expectation that we would have work underway in each of those wards simultaneously.
I don't, did we,
But in terms of the cost, could you walk us through how this is going to be paid for? It's a 50-50 split of the $1 million.
right.
Can you speak to how the district's going to pay for it in this, you only have 2 sheets as a summary. You don't have the executive
Well,
summary or the full report.
I'll do the easy part first, okay?
Okay.
DDOT has, is in its program for rebuilding and replacing and modernizing streets, about a 10, 15-year cycle. So during, let's say in 15 years, every street in the city, whether they're highly, very high traffic streets or just neighborhood streets, or streets that are eligible for Federal Highways Administration matching funds, are all done, redone in that period. And what we're trying to do at this point is to coordinate those efforts so that we can leverage what's already in the budget, what's already anticipated as a cost to the district, and in some cases what monies that the federal government will be paying for its share. It's usually an 80-20 split with the federal government on federal streets that are eligible for Federal Highways Administration monies. And the securitization thing, basically we're going to be going out to the bond market. I've asked Mr. Goulet if he would step up to give you a little explanation on how that's going to work.
Terrific. The 375 on our side, we spent extensive time looking to see what the cheapest way to finance this was for the DC residents for the district's portion of the work. And what we found was the most equitable way to do this was through the utility rate, because then all users of utility services pay for the cost of the financing. Also, the great thing about that is it's outside the district's debt cap, because utilities do not flow through the district's general fund. So the district can issue these bonds. The debt cap won't be impacted by it, and it provides the best savings for the district resident consumer because all utility users contribute through the rates.
What do you think the rate will be?
Wait, Tom, let's do this in orderly fashion.
Well, the rate increase for the average residential,
No, I apologize. What rate for the bonds do you think you'll get? Or-
we believe AAA status on them.
Sitting here at the John Wilson building, and I'm reminded of John Wilson, similar ceremony during the construction of the Green Line of Metro, when 10 people from the committee, including members of Congress and Metro officials, all stood up to praise each other and the work they had done. And John stood up at the end of the ceremony and said, "And I never want to see any of you again in my lifetime." The question on rates that we were having, ratepayers paying the rates, do Pepco shareholders bear any of the cost of this project, or will the cost all be passed on to the ratepayers?
Customers are going to pay for this. The way that it's been explained as far as the financing is that the Pepco piece that would be financed, half of it would be through long-term debt, and we'll access the capital market. But we'll also put $250 million of shareholder money to work. Now, will they recover all the cost over an extended period of time? Yes. And that's the way that any of these assets are financed. So it's not unique to Pepco. It's basically the business model of the utility world.
And I have no intentions of saying that I never want to see these folks again. Actually, some of them work for me, so I know I'll be seeing them. Yes. Wait a minute, let's get Mike. Mike hasn't had a chance to ask. Well, we haven't gone out to ask any of them their reaction to this, but if you remember, the task force meetings were open. We had people who came in and testified from the public, whether there were universities or hospitals or not. I really don't know. You all can probably tell me whether there were or not. But I don't, given the reliability improvements that will be achieved in the city, Mike, I really would be hard-pressed to think that they are not going to support something like this. We'll see as this thing unfolds in the weeks, and months ahead. But if you ask me to speculate about that, I would speculate that people would support this because it is a game changer in terms of increasing reliability in the city. Are you at, what did you say? Oh, I guess proportionally, right? Yeah.
The estimate across the commercial class would be somewhere between 5 and 9% relative to the $1.50 to the $3.25.
Matt, I'll come back to you. I just want to make sure we get people, first-timers a chance first.
See a difference on my bill, and when would I start to see a difference in my service?
Alan and Eric, you all. A lot depends on the legislation and getting it through the Public Service Commission. I can't give you a specific date on that. What I would say, though, we obviously want to move this along a pace. Nobody wants to hear about a plan to improve electric power reliability, and then it takes 2 or 3 years for it to be able to be approved. So it will move as quickly as we can possibly move it, recognizing that some of the decision makers, like the council, are really not even in the room
Mr. Mayor,
at
what
this
about
point.
a year? I mean, we're talking this year, next year?
Well, Bruce, I mean, I'll give you the same answer I just gave Matt, and that is we want to be able to move it along now. I wish the council were in a position to be able to address this legislation before they went on recess. I don't think that's realistic, but certainly it will be before them when they come back in September. I'd like to get it over to them while they're in a period of recess, because a lot of them, of course, work during those times anyway. And I'd love to see a hearing held, be the first hearing that the council conduct when they come back from recess. Knowing the legislative process, you could have a hearing, you could have a markup, and you could have 2 readings done by November.
I guess I'm just wondering, if I'm a ratepayer and I start to pay into this, how many years down the line, maybe this is a question for Pepco, will I see a difference?
Yeah, I think the way to look at this is that the first 9 to 12 months, as I mentioned, is going to be getting through the legislative process. Without boring you with a lot of details, any kind of securitization process is a very, very complex process. It's somewhat unique. We'll need to spend a lot of time, one, nailing the legislation down. You're going to be looking at the credit rating of both the city and Pepco. A lot of people are going to ask questions, a lot of the credit rating agencies, but we see our path through that. But I would anticipate that the first 12 months is going to be in laying the groundwork to get the legislation done, laying the groundwork to be able to go out and get the financing in order to then do the securitization. As I mentioned, there's also going to be simultaneously a lot of engineering work done. There's a lot of think about the coordination effort to overlay where these feeders are to the plans of DDOT or Washington Gas or DC Water, and trying to take advantage of having those streets open and doing this in the most efficient way. I think probably a decent estimate in year 2 would be that we would probably be able to have scaled up to spend maybe $100 million across those wards. And I would anticipate that within that same second year, customers are going to start experiencing something. So be relatively early on. It's not going to be 7 years. It's not at the end of the phase.
So you're
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Right, yeah, that's our expectation. Mhm. Right.
What's your end game? How long is it going to be?
It's somewhere between 6, 7 years.
Thanks.
I think the other thing is too, Matt, just to add to that, and Joe can speak to this better than I can, but it just seems to me that the more we improve reliability, when there are outages during that period, more quickly power will be restored because there will be a smaller pool, obviously, that will have to be restored. Yes.
Are these main transmission lines mainly on main arteries? What's the potential traffic impact? Is this comparable to like metro construction? And are there any areas that might be particularly impacted by this traffic-wise for 7 years, over 7 years?
I don't anticipate that. I want to go back and kind of just reshape the use of terminology. In our world, transmission they're the big high lines that you see on these huge kind of H structure things. These are on the kinds of poles that you see in a residential area. In the primaries, you'll see like stacks of wires. This is the very top wire. These are the primaries. So this is not, it's all at the distribution level, which candidly is why the PSC and the OPC are so intimately involved, because this is in fact what they regulate. And to an earlier question, there's going to be, I think justifiably so, a tremendous amount of oversight and interaction as we go through this. So I don't look at this kind of getting off track. It's really in this next year that's going to allow us to be smart about not triggering traffic problems. Or if it's going to be an imposition, is one of the reasons why we want to disperse the work across all of the impacted wards, so there's not multiple projects going on that could more likely trigger a traffic problem.
I'm going to ask Director Bellamy if he will address some of this as well, but he can, from a technical perspective, address it better than me. But again, remember that some of the work that will be done on the streets will have been work that we would have been doing anyway. And I don't know if that work is going to be any more disruptive than it otherwise would have been if we were just doing what was required to work on the streets. Terry.
We will work with all of the, good morning, Terry Bellamy, DDOT. We'll work with all the utilities and doing this work, but what we're talking about is about a 4 foot, about 3 foot deep, 4 foot wide is what we would take to put in a trench for Pepco. So it is not 10 feet down, it's not 12 feet deep, it is a regular conduit run. So there will be some impact, but we will move down the street, building manholes at key locations, and those manholes will be just a little deeper. And we'll be working a lot on what we call residential streets and minor arterials. There will be some major, but for the most part, as the trunk pull off the main line, they actually go into localized streets.
Mike, you'll have the last question, okay?
One question I've been getting most is how they've been identified. What's the process? They haven't been identified. What's the process for identifying them? People just want to, what's my neighborhood?
I think we know what the 60 feeters are, right? Yeah, I think we know. I think they're the ones that are the most egregious in this problem.
I've asked for a map. It would be great to get a map.
We'll get it to you.
And I've asked Georgie, I think, since my question, is this something that you can see being extended to other parts of the PHI territory? Is this something you go to Maryland and say, listen, we're doing this in DC? And you said you've already got some calls from elsewhere in the country.
One. Let's get the facts straight. This dialogue has been underway in every jurisdiction that we serve, but to varying degrees. I would say and it's somewhat reflective of the topography of our service territory. In southern New Jersey, it's primarily residential, in some ways very much the same way in Delaware. For the most part, in the city of Wilmington, Delaware, there's a very extensive undergrounding. More recently, after the derecho, I know you're aware of this, that Governor O'Malley convened a grid resiliency task force that really had a series of recommendations which included some selective undergrounding, which was also part of our filing that we made to the commission the latter part of 2012. So this is a discussion that's going on in all parts of our service territory, but the District of Columbia is by leaps and bounds out much further in front of this than we are. One last comment, it's any of the utilities that were severely impacted by Sandy, which fortunately we weren't, they're having this same discussion. So I think that some of the interest that I alluded to is really going to be directed at the district of how we've managed to kind of come together to come to what I think is a workable solution.
In the picture, is there a primary feeder line?
Max?
What, that one?
Yeah, that's a lateral, let me get to another picture, along this, on this picture to the right. That is a primary feeder where you see the construction with the two silver fiberglass arms. That's the primary main line.
Is these?
Yes, no, that's communication. That's secondary. These wires here are primary. I'm looking to see, I know that's.
Let me ask you to do this since you're up here. Can you describe what the characteristics are of a primary feeder so that people wouldn't say, well, I looked at that picture, but I don't know if I would know it again. Can you give people 3 or 4 things? Here, come on up here.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to look to see if I can see something to point. Everything's laying in the street, which is not what you really want to see. But, yeah. It's Michael Maxwell. I'm Vice President of Asset Management for Pepco Holdings. When you go down the street, a distribution street or a neighborhood, you'll see a pole with a cross arms, or maybe several cross arms. You'll see a square beam stretched across the circuit. This being a pole, but this is a little different. Just one second, and you'll see these things called insulators, and you'll see 3 wires running across the top of the across the top of the poles. Those 3 lines are what's considered to be a main line. So a feeder, a main line circuit. We've used different terminology here. When the mayor talked about laterals, there'll be some cases where there'll be laterals that are undergrounded. You'll see it'll be one wire tapped off at the very top of the pole, which is similar to what you'll see in the picture here. I'm looking to see if I got something else to show you, but that'll be a main line. When we talk about secondaries when we talk about secondaries and service wires, those are the wires that run straight to the house. You'll see a silver canister on the pole. It's a transformer. That's where the secondary or the service voltage is supplied to the house. I don't have that. Does that help?
You know, everybody got it?
Will the report, when it's issued, have a map or have a listing of addresses in terms of where the main feeder lines are?
Are you able to speak to that?
You
You're talking about the task force report? No, he wouldn't be able to speak to that.
I think we can certainly.
I don't see any reason why we can't provide that information.
Well, is the reports of the subcommittees going to be included in the report? Because my understanding, the technical committee went to great lengths to identify what these feeder lines are and where they are. So it'd be very helpful, for citizens to know these are the main feeder lines that are going to be impacted over the next 6 or 7 years.
Sure. Okay. Let me mention one other thing, too. I was just talking to Alan and Terry, and we think we're going to be able to do almost immediately a demonstration project of how this will work. Can we do that, Terry?
Yes.
Okay. That would show, how an area will be excavated, the undergrounding would be done, and then it would be replaced. So if you all would be interested in coming out to see that, we'll make sure that Pedro gets the word out to have people come and see how this is being dug. All right.
Will people's power be turned off while you're doing this excavation? People's power continues and you just do the connection?
That's correct.
Thank you all very much.
What about general questions for the news conference?
I'm going to do the general questions. Thank you all very much on the power issue.
I'm just trying to keep up.
All right. Who has the hour is getting late. It's almost 12:30. We've been here for an hour and a half. So, Tom?
Mr. Mayor, on a general question, Councilmember Tommy Wells is announcing for mayor on Saturday. He's already announced that. Muriel Bowser's in. How are you doing on your own thought process about when you will or if you will get into the mayor's race?
We are continuing. We're continuing on the pace that we were on, Tom.
That is no pace.
How you know?
Well, actually, it's not public. All right.
Ms. Brazil.
Superior Court alleging that a construction firm, Forrester Construction, had defrauded the district government in terms of its relationship with another company, EDC, as a CBE firm. Can you comment on it? And in the broader context of what does it say as regards the need to still clean up the CBE program, and do you intend to resubmit legislation to the council on the CBE program?
Well, there's a number of questions in it. Let me start with the first one, and that is, I'll let the Attorney General give you the details on that, but he was convinced that it was a fair and equitable agreement that was reached. I think there was they're out of the program for 30 months. They will forfeit $1 million. I think they're owed a little over $3 million. They will be paid a little over $2 million. So it's a fairly heavy penalty, and the Attorney General, I know, is of the belief that this was a fair and equitable settlement. Beyond that, I will let Mr. Nathan himself address the further details. As far as legislation is concerned, we've had a group that has worked vigorously on the CBE legislation. They had their final meeting yesterday. They think that they will be ready to go very shortly in terms of a report and a draft that we will be able to submit. So we're just weeks away, maybe days away, maybe hours away, minutes from being able.
Once the report is submitted or finished, then you will submit new legislation?
Yes.
And will you be consulted with Mr. Orange since he has had his own legislative package?
Well, he's actually had staff who participated in the CBE working group that we've had. So he's, I think, pretty cognizant of what we've been working on and the direction that this group is taking. And I really am, I'm really ecstatic with the work that they have done as a group, and really appreciate the hours. These are people who are very busy. They have met, I think, 7 or 8 times. Those hours have run anywhere, those meetings have run anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. So they put in a lot of time on an issue that is very important to the city. So I appreciate what they've done, and we look forward to being able to move forward quickly. Matt?
Just really quick on the power line issue. I know you have had trouble at your own home. Will this undergrounding help you hopefully in your neighborhood as well? Is there undergrounding going to take place near you?
I'm just like any other Pepco customer. I hope that it will actually increase reliability. Actually, it's an interesting question or statement, Matt, because I don't think there's been an outage yet where I wasn't affected. I was actually on my way back from China when the derecho occurred. And when I got back, my power was out, and it was out for the next 5 days. And I'm a good example. I wound up having to stay in a hotel, which was very expensive for me. I lost a lot of food in the process. So if you take my experience, and multiply it by the hundreds, if not thousands of people in the city, the financial impact of the improvements that will be made over time will be quite extraordinary. Mike?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to ask you about some of the budget stuff that the council is dealing with right now. One thing in particular that has attracted some attention is, Councilmember Bowser and her committee, she identified about $8 million in money to facilitate development down at the Yards area and moved it to the capital projects and work for it. Just wondered what you thought of that. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it was a huge mistake. The area that we're talking about down there is rapidly developing. A lot of work has been done, I think in this case by Forrester, by Forest City, not Forrester, Forest City, excuse me. Let me make sure we make that distinction. By Forest City. And, you know, I have met with them about a theater that they proposed to put there, and it would be the easternmost theater in the District of Columbia. And this will stymie that work for no particularly good reason. So I think it should be reversed. The money should be put back where it was in the first place. It was the right project. I think the people of Ward 6 feel similarly. And if you would like to know how I really feel, you know, be happy to tell you.
Another thing, Councilmember Orange also wants to devote more money to Emancipation Day festivities. You think that's a good use of city funds?
Well, I think we had, you know, quite a robust, you know, commitment this year. We were able to do a lot of things, and I think we have enough money to be able to do what we need to do. Paul, you've been helping to monitor these things. You believe that there was enough money in there this year to do what was worthy of the city?
Yes, I do.
That's the man that oversees it, so he believes that we have enough money to get done what we'd like to get done. I happen to be a big supporter of Emancipation Day. Some of you will recall that when the previous mayor proposed to eliminate it as a holiday from the budget, I was the one that really championed keeping it in as a holiday because it's uniquely ours. It's a way of, frankly, continuing to focus on the plight of disenfranchisement that we experience in the city. So let me be absolutely clear that I heartily support Emancipation Day. I heartily support us being able to have a set of activities associated with it, but I do believe we have enough money that's devoted to this to have a worthy, more than worthy celebration. Matt? I think it's around 65 or 70% now. And I think this will get, you know, over the life of this, and there are 3 phases that are being proposed. Of course, you know, for phase 2, people can come back and revisit. And I think for phase 3, right, Alan, they can come back and revisit that as well. But if we were to go through the 3 phases, probably would cover virtually everyone. Is that right? Okay.
To 70, that's what it, that's
No,
what
65 to 70 now.
Okay, so
Yeah. So yeah, it will go up from 65 to 70. Either of you know what the percentage is that would increase by as a result of phase 1? Yeah.
The statistic the mayor is referencing is the amount of people who are fully underground right now. The first phase is focused on reliability, not on full undergrounding. That would be off in the distance in the third phase. So the first phase, you won't have any higher percent of people who are fully underground. What you will have is a dramatic increase in reliability. So that's the first phase is a reliability phase, focusing on getting the most targeted direct investments in improving reliability. So that's the focus there, not on trying to go for full undergrounding in this phase. I don't know if that...
And that means the 60 feeders that have been identified are the most egregious offenders in terms of those which create the power outages, right? Right. No, I think it's more than that. Let me ask those who were in the task force, but I think it was.
First phase of this project, not putting wires underground, is something else, of reliability.
No, it is.
Is that tree cutting, tree limb cutting, and all the calls we get about that?
The first phase is focused on the primary main lines and laterals, so all these significant lines that have widespread outage impact going underground. They're going under the ground. Yeah, so absolutely. The secondary service lines, that's a later step. In terms of the number of residents, there's a number of ways to measure what percentage is underground. One is to take the land mass, the other is to take the number of customers, and then the other is to take the amount of bill that's spent. Obviously, downtown has, you know, higher businesses, so if you look at it from a bill percent or a land percent, you're talking probably 60% underground there. If it's a customer base, residential pays less, then it's probably reversed about 40-60 the other way. So it really just depends on how you measure it, but both statistics would be correct.
So the mayor's already late, but he has 2 more questions and that's it.
Okay, Mike.
Mayor Gray, could I get your thoughts on Mary Shea and the Transportation Committee's proposal to expand circulator routes across the district and her proposal to increase double the fare rate? In your mind, is that an increase in taxes, fines, or fees?
Well, I wouldn't have, I would not have increased the fee, otherwise I would have done it in the budget. I think the larger question for me is, are we going to have then a local bus service? You know, and if we are going in that direction, I think those are discussions we need to have with Metro so that they understand that the circulator eventually could replace local bus service. It's not anything I've contemplated, but if I were Metro, I would be asking those questions, and I think we have an obligation to them to say where we intend to go with this. I did not propose any fare increases, Mike. I would be able to figure that out. If I wanted to double the fares, I would have proposed them. I would construe anything that was not in the budget that I submitted to be something that I chose not to do. Doesn't mean that I wouldn't eventually support it in working with the council. We've got a lot of work to do before we get to a vote on this budget. There's some things that they want to do. There are ideas that they will have. We will, we will meet with them. We will talk with them. That will be going on over the next week. But I stand with the proposal that I submitted. My budget is the one that's on the table. And if it wasn't in there, then I would assume it was not something I was going to do. Thank you. Well, I think there are those. I think we need to figure out what is the relationship. As the circulator is taking on an increasing presence in the city. So I think from a perspective of intentionality, we need to work to figure out what is the intended relationship between the local bus service and the circulator. People like the circulator. One of the reasons probably because it costs $1. It's fairly cheap to go from one side of the city in some instances to other areas of the city. So as we expand it, I don't think we should just expand it in a kind of serendipitous or situational way. We should do this saying, here's what we plan to do. That's what we've done with streetcars. We have a 37-mile system that is laid out for streetcars, and people have a sense of where we're trying to get to. How soon we get there will depend upon the dollars that we have available. But at least people know right now, my street or my neighborhood is going to get a streetcar, and I'd like you to add to that. I'm not sure we can't make that statement about the relationship of circulator and local bus service at this point. Thank you all very much.